Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke. People really hate J.D. Vance. Whether it's his weird, creepy demeanor or his weird, creepy stance on the issues that Americans care about, it's one thing that a surprising number of us can actually agree on these days. Vance is not somebody we want anywhere near the levels of power. In this episode, I try to get to the bottom of why people have such an intense dislike for the Republican vice presidential nominee. Stick around.
This is a crusade. This is a holy war against the deep state.
Where are the dictators? Where are the strong men?
Donald Trump is our instrument for retribution.
I'm going to fight for Christians. I'm going to fight for white people.
They have the Great Reset. We have the Great Awakening.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia? Because I am.
I want to see these people go through misery because of their grooming against our children.
After the assailant entered the home asking, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Those are the very same words used by the mob when they stormed the United States Capitol.
I did nothing wrong.
J.D. Vance is a weird guy. I think everyone can agree on this, that Trump's choice for vice president is a creepy, flaming weirdo. People absolutely dislike the man. And the more they know about him, it seems like the more they dislike him. Here's Vance at the Republican National Convention talking about what he was brought onto the ticket to do.
He just said, look, I think we've got to go save this country. I think you're the guy who can help me in the best way. You can help me govern. You can help me win. You can help me in some of these Midwestern states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and so forth.
Well, that makes sense. I can see that. How's it working out for them? This is from CNN.
Does J.D. Vance help Trump in those states?
Not according to the favorable ratings. His favorable rating is below 30%. His unfavorable rating is up above 40%. That creates a net favorability rating of minus 16 points. He does worse in his home region at minus 16 points than he does in the average of all polls, which is a minus 5-point net favorability rating. So the people who know him best, the region that knows him best, they like him even less than America likes him. And of course, as you pointed out, again in that kind intro, is he is historically unpopular for a VP nominee coming out of his first convention as a VP nominee.
All right, so let's specifically look at some former Republican vice presidential candidates. What do you see?
Yeah, you mentioned Sarah Palin. How about Dan Quayle as well? These are two folks who I think most people remember as not being particularly popular. The amazing thing was coming out of their conventions, they actually were pretty popular. Quayle with a plus 15-point net favorability rating. Sarah Palin with a plus 26-point net favorability rating. Again, Vance at minus 5 points is just off the charts and falling off the chart in the wrong direction. Not up above the chart, but down below the chart. The fact is, he is historically unpopular, even more so than VP nominees, who of course went on to infamy. At least in
well, I mean, right. So you look at what happened to those two, and they plunged. Some may say, well, maybe there's nowhere to go but up for Vance. But in margins, that's not true. It can get worse.
It can get definitely
worse. Just don't know
worse.
which way it will go.
That's not good. And yeah, assuming there's nowhere to go but up is not really something I'd want to bet on. Because this guy is historically unpopular for a lot of reasons. And they aren't reasons he's going to be able to shake or walk away from. Part of it is his weird, creepy demeanor.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
But forget the Diet Mountain Dew stuff. Forget the couch jokes. Forget the fact that he's a Yale venture capitalist who's trading on his upbringing to insinuate that he's a man of the people and that he understands the problems facing the American working class as a result. People have looked past worse, and they'd look past this too. However, his core beliefs simply do not line up with the majority of Americans, and there's just no way to spin it otherwise. For example, Vance says here in this 2022 clip that he favors a ban on abortions, even in cases of rape or incest, which he refers to as inconvenient circumstances.
Should a woman be forced to carry a child to term after she has been the victim of incest or rape? Look, my view on this has been very clear, and I think the question betrays a certain presumption that's wrong. It's not whether a woman should be forced to bring a child to term, it's whether a child should be allowed to live, even though the circumstances of that child's birth are somehow inconvenient.
Yeah. However, 80% of Americans disagree with him, and that includes 56% of Republicans. You know, the party whose ticket he's running on? He's also in favor of pregnancy surveillance to make sure women from states where abortion is illegal don't travel to states where it's legal to have them. Here's him advocating for a federal response to his insane fantasy about George Soros flying plane loads of black women to California to have abortions.
Okay, look, here's a situation. Let's say Roe versus Wade is overruled. Ohio bans abortion. In 2022 or let's say 2024. And then, every day, George Soros sends a 747 to Columbus to load up disproportionately black women to get them to go have abortions in California. And of course, the left will celebrate this as a victory for diversity. That's kind of creepy.
Health justice is when we exterminate working class black people.
Something like that could, that would be a really weird turn of events that could happen. Yes.
And it's like, if that happens, do you need some federal response to prevent it from happening? Because it's really creepy. And, I'm pretty sympathetic to that, actually.
No, JD. What's creepy is you fantasizing about George Soros sending plane loads of black women to California for abortions and asking for a federal response because of your sick fantasy. Stuff like this, frankly, is why his numbers are so bad. People don't want this kind of totalitarian bullshit, and when you present them with a candidate who can't stop saying it, they'll react accordingly. And it gets even better. He's even got a bunch of his own money in Rumble, the far-right YouTube alternative. In 2021, Narya Capital, that's JD's venture capitalist firm that got early backing from Peter Thiel, made a major investment in Rumble. Not only did it make Narya one of Rumble's top shareholders, it also gave the firm a seat on Rumble's board. Financial disclosures filed by Vance in conjunction with his Senate bid also show that he made a personal investment in Rumble that was valued at between $100,000 and $250,000. Now, for those of you who are fortunate enough to not know what Rumble is, it's where people like Nick Fuentes host their content. People like Patriot Front. Yeah, you've got your share of the MAGA Republicans, Dan Bongino, guys like that. Alex Jones is all over Rumble. But they don't care what kind of stuff they're really hosting for the most part. They're just concerned with those sweet, sweet right-wing clicks. The head of Rumble is this Canadian billionaire who's worth like $1.6 billion now as a result of this. So yeah, it's worked out pretty well for everybody involved. And, it's kind of a shame about how it's worked out for the rest of us, but they're not worried about that. Seriously, it's mostly his ideas, which are absolutely terrible for most people who aren't rich white VC guys or Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk.
Only in America. And only in America is it possible where a young man, and he's older than me, but he's relatively young in the modern political dynamic, can come from absolute poverty, be abused, raised by his grandmother, had all the odds stacked against him.
Yeah, that Barack Obama guy, he really was amazing, wasn't he?
To become the nominee for vice president of the United States, for the frontrunner and former president. How did we get here?
Oh. Vance is also a big proponent of Project 2025. In fact, he wrote the foreword for Kevin Roberts' new book. You remember Kevin Roberts from episode 146? Well, it seems like J.D. Vance and he are friends.
And I actually know a couple of my friends who are working on that very project, because we sort of looked at the last 5 years and we're like, why is it that there were so few people willing to staff this administration given the electoral mandate that Trump had just won? Isn't this just a terrible reflection on the entire political system of political conservatism? And so, yeah, I think we got to do the hard work of institution building. And again, I've got friends who are working on this very problem right now, such that if there is a Trump administration round 2 or a DeSantis or a Hawley administration, that we actually have
the bureaucracy in place so that that person can govern effectively and not be constantly undercut.
Now, I hate to assume that his friends he's referring to here are the Project 2025 folks, but let's be real here. They're the same people. And if you're not in favor of Project 2025, which most people aren't, then you don't want this guy anywhere near the presidency. Okay, so where did he get these ideas? It seems like a lot of them came from a really weird little guy named Curtis Yarvin.
I was thinking a really good place to start would be on the concept of democracy.
Oh, sure. Okay. Let's talk about democracy for a second. Actually have a nice little line prepared on that, which is, people are very fond on Twitter and so forth of these political quadrants. And one way you can draw a political quadrant is to say, you can ask two questions. Is your country a democracy? And should it be a democracy? So the set of people who answer no to both of those questions, that's a relatively small set, and it's a pretty freaking weird set. So, I'm kind of part of that set. So that's my perspective.
Curtis Yarvin is a retired software developer in Silicon Valley, and for years he wrote screeds under the pen name Mencius Moldbug. He wrote stuff like this. There is one problem, though, which is the problem that I mentioned in Chapter 1. The problem of adults who are not productive members of society. In our little newspeak, we call them wards of the realm. A ward is any resident who is not capable of earning a living, is not accepted as a dependent by any guardian, and is not wanted by any other patch. The initial conversation of our present democratic and, of course, completely dysfunctional San Francisco into the realm of Friscorp will produce quite a few wards, at least relative to the number we would expect to emerge in a healthy society. But there will always be black sheep, and there will always be wards. As delegate of San Francisco, what should you do with these people? I think the answer is clear. Alternative energy. Since wards are liabilities, there is no business case for retaining them in their present ambulatory form. Therefore, the most profitable disposition for this dubious form of capital is to convert them into biodiesel, which can help power the Muni buses. He then goes on to say he's just kidding, as they all do. It's a joke. Nothing is serious. You're a shit lib for taking any of this stuff seriously. Just like Jack Posobiec does, just like Nick Fuentes does. Wash, rinse, repeat. Yarvin is also the guy who popularized the concept of the red pill as a right-wing trope. No kidding.
I see you as very interested in, you're kind of a pill dispenser, aren't you?
Yeah, sort of. You
like dispensing pills, whether they be red pills or most recently clear pill is a recent idea you have.
Yeah, I'm not. I have questions about that as a marketing concept, but I'm pretty sincere about it.
Right. I take that as sincere. In fact, to my understanding, you actually popularized the term red pill in the political context. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually true. I can tell you actually where I was when I came up with that, which is in the Haight-Ashbury at Hayden Masonic. I was in the People's Cafe, and the People's Cafe is the decor in the People's Cafe is entirely like 60s revolutionary stickers. So, it's a very kind of positive place. To those who have seen The Matrix, it's obvious that, the red pill is this kind of left-wing, analogy. But, what if you made it a right-wing one? Wouldn't that be interesting?
Needless to say, this stuff found an audience among the libertarian tech bros in Silicon Valley. People like Peter Thiel of Thiel Capital were huge fans and helped little Curtis gain notoriety. Now, Peter Thiel donates a lot of money to political candidates, and he once helped Hulk Hogan sue Gawker out of existence. So we're going to be really careful with what we say about him. Just know that he once said that he, quote, no longer believes in democracy, unquote. So take his participation in the system with that perspective. So little Curtis got somewhat famous. And as the right gained power, more and more people started picking up on what he was saying, including Thiel Capital employee J.D. Vance, who said the following on Jack Murphy Live during his 2022 Senate campaign.
So, I think that there are two different ideas here, right? So one is like, there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written about some of these things. And so one is to basically accept that this entire thing is going to fall in on itself. right? And so the task of conservatives right now is to preserve as much as can be preserved. And then when the inevitable collapse of the country comes, ensure that conservatives are able to sort of help build back the country in a way that's actually better, not Joe Biden's build back better, but actually some sort of reconstruction of the country. I think that's too pessimistic and too defeatist. I tend to think that we should seize the institutions of the left and turn them against the left, right? We need like a de-Bathification program, but like a de-wokeification program in the United States, right?
And he's actually ready to take it a lot farther than that. He's not content to just let the whole thing fall apart on its own. Here's what he said he wants Trump to do.
I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. I think he'll probably win again in 2024. And he'll win by a margin such that he will be the president of the United States in January of 2025. I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Except it probably won't come to that, because the Supreme Court recently ruled that the president has immunity for official acts. So he doesn't even have to pull the Andrew Jackson routine at that point. One other thing he's in favor of upon taking power is purging all the woke, along the lines of the way the Nazis were purged.
This elite ideology is everywhere and in all the things. What other options do we have besides voting them out, which we're seeing is ineffectual?
Yeah. So again, this is like a tough question, but this is maybe the question that confronts us right now, right? So
yes.
Okay. So one model is, what happened to Germany after the Nazis lost, or what happened to the Iraqis after we threw Saddam Hussein out. And, denazification, de-Bathification, there was this massive recognition that you couldn't just put, replace the bad people, replace the bad Nazis with the good Germans. There was this entire effort to deinstitutionalize that ideology. And by the way, I think that a lot of the lessons learned in the 40s are being applied to the United States. There's this weird way where you're kind of like completely de-Americanizing American culture. Now, that's really what's going on.
So, dude is equating the left with the Nazis after World War II or the Ba'ath Party after the Second Iraq War. He is saying that anyone on the left needs to be purged from the government and barred in the same way that Nazis and Baathists were. This is what they think about you. And more importantly, this is the role they see themselves in. And they're getting pretty upfront about it too. Vance wrote an editorial review for longtime Did Nothing Wrong podcast hate listener Jack Posobiec's new book entitled, quote, On Humans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them, unquote. The premise of which is that both historical communists and modern-day progressives fundamentally oppose civilization itself, and therefore they're not really people. So it's perfectly okay to get rid of them. I've actually read this book, and I was quite struck by the amount of praise that Jack lavishes on former Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, whose particular brand of repression became known as the Terror Blanco, or White Terror. I know, right? The White Terror designated certain groups as enemies of the regime. Groups such as Spanish Republicans who were loyal to the republic that Franco toppled, liberals, leftists, Protestants, intellectuals, homosexuals, Freemasons, Jews, immigrants, and Basque, Catalan, Andalusian, and Galician nationalists. This resulted in somewhere between 200,000 to 400,000 deaths, as well as mass rape, forced labor, and human experimentation. Nobody's really sure of the exact totals because most of this was in unmarked graves, but it has been officially ruled a crime against humanity. And it's a legacy that Spain has been grappling with ever since. It is now somewhat akin to Holocaust denial in Germany, how it gets treated. You're just not allowed to glorify this guy anymore, which is probably a good thing. It's impossible to read it and come away without the sense that the author can't wait to get started here. Here's Jack in his own words.
I just wanted to say, look, welcome to the end of democracy. We're here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here. We'll replace it with this right here.
Amen.
Now, he's going to tell you they're just trolling, that you're being sensitive and you shouldn't take things so seriously. And this is coming from the guy who just wrote a 300-page love letter to fascism. Here's the blurb that J.D. Vance wrote for the book. In the past, communists marched in the street waving red flags. Today, they march through human resources, college campuses, and courtrooms to wage lawfare against good, honest people. In Unhumans, Jack Posobiec and Joshua Lysak reveal their plans and show us what to do to fight back. Yeah. When you put this together with the rest of the weird fascist rhetoric coming out of these people, it's pretty clear where they want this all to go. The thing is, their entire belief system is basically that we need a monarch. Because us plebs can't run things for ourselves. We're children, you see. Here's Yarvin again to explain it to you.
The thing is, what people, are really, really good at now is they have this they're amazingly frivolous. They're amazingly ironic. They're basically a nation of children. And, and they have the playful quality of children. They have the weakness of children. They have the short attention span of children. And therefore, if you're designing a game for these people to play, something for them to do that matters, it really needs to be designed as something that's essentially childish.
To paraphrase Yarvin, some people are just born to be slaves. And not to belabor the point, but we literally fought a war to be rid of one king. Not being ruled by a king is as American as apple pie and baseball, even more so. It is our origin story, for crying out loud. So, while the idea of having a monarch appeals to people who would like to be that monarch or to serve that monarch, it's a real turnoff for the vast majority of the population. And unfortunately, Trump picked himself a guy who buys into this stuff completely. I'm still scratching my head about the why of this move. From a traditional politics lens, it makes no sense. Vance brings nothing to the table that wasn't already there. If the goal of the vice president is to bring the state home that they're from in an election, Ohio's already voting GOP. That's not really in question. And even if we thought that was going to be a question, Vance's approval ratings in Ohio are lower than anywhere else in the country. So, those who know him best, all that. And he's really toxic to a huge chunk of the population.
What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Maybe he didn't actually think that one through. But stuff like that has done a whole lot of harm to Trump's campaign in the last while. He is so far underwater with women, it feels like the surest sign ever that they've just given up on that demographic, because how do you think you're going to win? Tell me your path to victory at this point, because I got to be honest, I don't see it. What I see is a few years of Democrat overperformance, driven largely by women who are realize that they are viewed as breeding stock by the GOP. You put that together with a switch at the top of the Democratic ticket. Now you've got Vice President Kamala Harris running instead of Joe Biden. And you've got the potential for a truly epic blowout. At least that's what it looks like from up here in the cheap seats. Maybe Vance is right and that the vice presidential pick doesn't actually matter.
My attitude is it doesn't really care. As much as it doesn't really matter. As much as this is a hit to my ego, people are going to vote primarily for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris.
Right.
that's the way these things go.
All I know is they had better hope he's right about this. Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can find us on the web at didnothingwrongpod.com. Please make sure you subscribe to get our content straight into your inbox. You can also follow us on Twitter at GrizaBJJ, GRZABJJ, as well as DNWPod. We're extremely grateful for paid subscriptions and donations that allow us to keep doing this important work. Thanks, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.